Daniel's collapse didn't arrive all at once. It came in loops, quiet, painful loops that looked almost harmless at first. He would wake up late, promise himself he'd start fresh, then reach for his phone before his feet even touched the floor. 5 minutes became 30. 30 became an hour. By the time he finally stood up, the day already felt lost. Over the next few weeks, the pattern deepened. He tried to fix himself with quick solutions, a new planner, a 2-week gym challenge, a playlist called Productive Mornings. But each attempt lasted 2, maybe 3 days before collapsing under the weight of his exhaustion, and he hated himself for it. Bills collected on the counter, emails went unanswered. A recruiter left a voicemail asking to touch base, but he didn't call back. He couldn't explain it. This heavy paralysis that made even simple tasks feel impossible. Meanwhile, everyone around him moved forward. Former co-workers posted promotions online. Friends shared photos of new apartments and weekend trips. His parents sent gentle messages. "We're just checking in. Are you all right?" He told them he was fine, but he wasn't. Time kept sliding. Days blended into nights. Nights drifted into weeks. And with each passing month, the world outside seemed to grow faster while he stood still. The physical toll followed quickly. Eyes burning from late-night scrolling. Back stiff from hours spent sitting in the same slouch position. Junk food wrappers accumulating in corners he stopped noticing. Sleep broken and shallow. But here's the truth no one tells you. A life doesn't collapse in a dramatic explosion. It collapses in small, unremarkable moments of neglect. Daniel's breaking point arrived on an ordinary afternoon. He went to buy groceries, just a few things, and his card declined. Not once, twice. People behind him shifted uncomfortably. Someone sighed. Daniel's face went hot, his hands shaking as he stepped aside and walked out with nothing. And something finally snapped. He returned to his apartment, closed the door, and sat in silence. For the first time in months, he saw the mess clearly. Not just the room, but himself. It wasn't the world that was unbalanced. It was him. The morning after that silent collapse felt strangely hollow. No anger, no motivation, just a quiet ache beneath his ribs. Daniel stepped outside for the first time in days, wandering without purpose through streets washed pale by early light. The city was waking slowly, shops unlocking, bicycles rolling past, a soft breeze carrying the scent of rain. He didn't know why he turned down the narrow side street. He didn't know why he stopped at the small wooden sign hanging above a modest doorway. Center for traditional Japanese arts. But something in its stillness pulled him in. Inside, the world felt different. Warm, silent, balanced. An older man stood at a low table, pulling a brush across a sheet of paper with deliberate, almost sacred precision. Each movement slow, steady, unbroken. The stroke finished in perfect calm. The man looked up, a quiet gaze, measured, present. "My name is Kenji Mori," he said. "Sit." Daniel obeyed before he understood why. For a long moment, they sat without speaking. Just breath, just space. Then Kenji said a word Daniel had never heard. "Kintōsei." He spoke it again, slower this time. Kintōsei, the art of returning to balance. A gentle, poetic translation. Then the deeper meaning, it is the discipline of rebuilding yourself through harmony, routine, and silent action. Kenji dipped the brush again, drew one clean stroke, and continued. In old Japan, this was how a broken man found himself again, not through force, not through motivation, but through returning to breath, to posture, to rhythm, to to self. A brief origin story unfolded in Kenji's voice, of a monk after war who rebuilt his identity not by seeking glory, but by repeating one simple ritual at dawn each day. A single stroke, a single return. Then Kenji delivered the line that would echo through Daniel's life. A man does not rise by force. He rises by returning to balance. And as Daniel listened in the quiet room, something shifted inside him. This was where his real journey began. Daniel came back the next morning. He wasn't sure why. Something about the quiet in Kenji's studio felt safer than the noise in his mind. The room smelled faintly of ink and cedar. Light filtered through a single window, soft and balanced. Kenji greeted him with a nod. "Sit," he said. Daniel lowered himself onto the mat, knees stiff, back tight. Kenji placed a small wooden timer beside him. 5 minutes, no goals, no expectations, just return to your breath each time it wanders. The timer clicked. Silence settled. Within seconds, Daniel's leg twitched. His thoughts scattered. He imagined checking his phone. He fought the urge to stand, but Kenji had told him, "You will fail. When you notice, simply return." That is Kintōsei. When the 5 minutes finally ended, Daniel felt something he hadn't felt in months. A tiny, almost invisible sense of steadiness. Kenji handed him a slip of paper. 3 lines written with delicate brush strokes. Open window. Drink water. 3 slow breaths. A morning ritual, Kenji said. A beginning? Daniel tucked the paper into his pocket as if it were fragile. But this was only the beginning. Daniel returned each day that week. Kenji rarely spoke, but when he did, his words carried weight. Over tea, he shared fragments of his own story. A successful salaryman, long hours, rising pressure, a collapse at 49, a month spent in a mountain temple where a monk taught him Kintōsei. Routine brings harmony, Kenji said. Harmony brings identity. Identity brings strength. Daniel nodded, unsure if he understood, but wanting to. Kenji demonstrated a ritual. He opened the window, placed both feet on the floor, took 1 breath, then made a single brush stroke, each movement slow, grounded, intentional. This is balance in action, Kenji said. Identity beats motivation. Those words stayed with Daniel long after he left. Over the next 10 days, Daniel completed his morning ritual 12 times, 1 day doubled. A small victory, barely noticeable to anyone else. But inside, something subtle was shifting. Yet there was a problem. 2 weeks later, life pressed back. Daniel received an unexpected call about a potential job. He panicked. He tried to overhaul everything overnight. New gym routine, strict diet, long to-do lists. He forgot Kintōsei's simplicity. He abandoned his morning ritual. Stress surged. He spiraled. For 3 days, he drifted back into old patterns. Late mornings, fast food, endless scrolling. You've probably felt this before, haven't you? That moment when one small slip becomes a full collapse. On the 4th day, embarrassed, he walked back into the studio. Kenji didn't scold him. He simply poured tea. "Have you ever tried to change everything at once?" Kenji asked quietly, "and ended up changing nothing?" Daniel nodded. Kenji continued. "Balance is not perfection. Balance is returning, again and again." Daniel breathed out, a long, shaky exhale. For the first time, he understood. "Discipline creates freedom," Kenji added. A line that hit him harder than expected. What followed was not dramatic. It was quiet, steady, imperfect. Over the next 6 months, Daniel practiced Kintōsei in simple ways. He woke at the same hour each morning, opened the window, drank his water, breathed with awareness. He added one silent discipline, 20 minutes of focused work. No music, no phone. The neuroscience behind it was simple. Silence stabilizes attention. Repetition strengthens neural identity pathways. Predictable routines reduce dopamine crashes. Daniel didn't know the science in detail, but he felt its truth. Slowly, his days began to align. He cleaned his room, organized his desk, set a small weekly goal, and completed it. At his part-time job, he finished tasks early. A co-worker told him, "You always seem so calm lately." Daniel wasn't sure what to say, but inside, a spark of pride flickered. Here's the truth no one tells you. When a man begins to return to balance, people notice, even before he does. But he didn't expect what came next. Life, as always, tested his progress. A sudden schedule change at work, a message from his ex, a family issue that demanded attention. Old patterns tried to return, the urge to escape, to numb, to hide. One evening, he arrived at the studio frustrated and restless. Kenji studied him quietly, then handed him a notebook. "Tonight," he said, "you begin your evening return." He explained, "Write one line about your day, just one, then breathe once, slowly, then put the world down." Daniel practiced it. Awkward at first, then strangely grounding. Viewer question: be honest. Do you have any ritual that brings you back to yourself each evening? Over the next months, Daniel returned to this ritual again and again. Not perfectly, but consistently enough that the weight in his chest began to lift. One night, as he finished his single written line, it finally clicked. Kintōsei was not about controlling life. It was about returning to balance whenever life tilted. And for the first time in years, Daniel felt something unfamiliar but powerful, a quiet confidence, a sense of self, rebuilding, a man emerging. But the real transformation was still ahead. Kintōsei was never meant to stay inside a quiet studio. It was a system, a living framework, designed to rebuild a man from the inside out. One evening, Kenji invited Daniel to sit beside him at the low wooden table. A candle burned between them, its flame steady, despite the faint draft. "Tonight," Kenji said, "you will learn the structure of Kintōsei. 4 pillars, 4 returns." He drew them slowly on paper, each stroke deliberate. "Your first return," Kenji said, "is the morning. One simple ritual, repeated daily. Open the window, drink a glass of water, take 3 slow breaths." This wasn't about productivity. It was about identity stability. Neuroscience calls it pattern priming. A predictable action that calms the limbic system and reduces decision fatigue. "When you begin in balance," Kenji said, "the day bows to you." Daniel chose 20 minutes of silent work. No music, no notifications, no noise. Silence activates the brain's default mode network, strengthening long-term focus and emotional regulation. It's where identity consolidates and clarity emerges. Kenji asked him softly, "Have you ever tried doing something important in complete silence, just once?" Most people never have. And that's why they stay scattered. Identity shapes behavior more powerfully than motivation. Daniel chose a single line: "I am the man who returns to balance." Repeating it wasn't affirmation, it was instruction, a cue to the brain, a reminder to act from identity rather than emotion. Motivation fades, Kenji said. Identity remains. The final pillar was the simplest and the hardest. When Daniel broke the routine, and he often did, He performed one small act to return: a breath, a cleaned corner, a line in his notebook. Behavioral psychology calls this the break-the-chain correction, the antidote to the all-or-nothing collapse. This, Kenji said, tapping the paper, is how a man rebuilds himself, not perfectly, but daily. Daniel practiced the 4 pillars across work, health, evenings, and relationships, and slowly, Kintōsei began to shape not just his days, but the man he was becoming. Transformation never arrives with fireworks. It arrives quietly, through small returns, repeated, until they become who you are. Over the next months, Daniel's life shifted in phases, each one deeper than the last. The first signs were almost invisible. He woke up before the alarm, just a minute early, but early. He opened the window, breathed deeply, and felt the morning air settle into his chest. At work, he finished tasks without rushing. A coworker leaned over one afternoon and said, "You've been steady lately. What changed?" Daniel didn't know how to answer, but he felt something strengthening beneath the surface, a quiet anchor. A calm mind is a strong mind, he reminded himself. As the weeks passed, Daniel added structure without forcing it. He enrolled in a night course to rebuild his career path. Every evening before studying, he performed his return moment. One line in his notebook, one breath, a single act of grounding. The neuroscience behind it was beginning to show results. Routine stabilizes dopamine, silence improves focus, identity repetition reshapes neural pathways. And he felt it. His attention stretched longer, his emotions steadied faster, his days no longer slipped away. Have you ever felt your discipline quietly strengthening, almost without trying? Daniel felt exactly that. The true test came unexpectedly. His job assigned him a complex project with a tight deadline. Pressure surged. Old fears clawed at him. The urge to escape, scrolling, procrastination, numbing, returned with force. For a moment, he could feel the old Daniel rising. But then he stopped, stood still, breathed once. He opened the window, drank his water, spoke his identity out loud. "I am the man who returns to balance." And the storm inside him calmed. He worked in silence for 20 minutes. Then another 20, then another. This was the moment of transformation. He was no longer the boy who ran from difficulty. He had become the man who returned to balance. 1 year later, Daniel's life didn't look perfect, but it looked his. He had a stable job, a healthier body, a few deep friendships, a living rhythm. People around him noticed. His manager trusted him. A classmate admired his discipline. And Kenji, always quiet, always watching, stood in the back of the studio as Daniel guided new students through their first silent practice. Daniel bowed at the end of the session, stepped outside, and the dawn met him with soft, rising light. Have you ever realized you're no longer who you used to be? Daniel had, and for the first time, he felt at peace with the man he was becoming. Daniel's story was never about perfection. It was about return. He had fallen. Yes, slowly, quietly, painfully. But with each small ritual, each silent discipline, each breath taken with intention, he found his way back to himself. And this is the part most people overlook. Transformation isn't built through momentum. It's built through balance, through the simple, repeated act of coming home to who you are. Kintōsei taught him that a man's strength isn't measured by how hard he pushes, but by how consistently he returns. Return to breath, return to posture, return to discipline, return to identity. You might not need a dramatic breakthrough. You might not need a new life, a new city, or a new beginning. You might simply need one place, one ritual, one moment, one breath that brings you back to center. Because your life doesn't change when everything becomes easier. Your life changes when you learn to return, again and again, even when everything becomes hard. That is the essence of Kintōsei, not escape, not control, but harmony. A discipline rooted in silence, practiced in simple actions, strengthened in daily returns. Discipline creates peace. Presence creates strength. Identity creates direction. As Daniel stepped into the quiet morning, he knew he hadn't reached an ending. He had simply found the balance he would return to for the rest of his life. Return to yourself. Return to stillness. Return to balance. Let the noise fall away. Let the discipline rise. Let your identity lead. Now, breathe. Share this with someone who needs to return to balance.